Well, hello, everybody. It is 1 o'clock on the dot, so we'll go ahead and get started. I am getting some emails about people that are struggling to get on, so I'm just going to do a quick intro here and get us going so I can help the other people get their links. I'm Anna Vivanti. I do the development coordination here with Illinois Crisis Prevention Network. Nice to see everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day to spend it with us. As usual, or if you're new to us, your cameras are disabled and you are muted, so we can't hear you, we can't see you, so feel free to move about and do what you guys need to do. This is a brand new training, so we're very excited today. We will record today's session, and when I get approval from the two speakers, we'll go ahead and post that on the website. If you go to icpn.org, you will see that our past recordings are posted. I think we have all of the conference sessions up and posted, as well as our community training. So if you guys need to go back and view any of those, you feel free to do that. We do have a few new trainings posted. So if you guys are starting to get a little squirmy about your CEs, I know the Qs have CEs due the end of the fiscal year. So we do have a couple posted. So make sure you guys visit the website and register for any of those if you need to meet your continuing education, or if you just want to hang out with us, that would be awesome too. We do have a couple left this month. As far as continuing education, we are all the way caught up with CEs, except for the one that we had last week. So if you're missing a continuing education or you need anything like that, go ahead and reach out to me and we'll make sure you guys get what you need. Just give us a couple of weeks to get this one out. I know, again, we're up against the fiscal year here, so we'll try to get it out within the next 7 to 10 days. And I think that actually might be it. Usually I make a little note card and I didn't today, but we'll use the chat box as our main source of communication here. So if you guys want to say hi, if you want to shoot a message, if you guys want to communicate with each other, just say hi, anything like that, we'll go ahead and use that chat box. And if you guys have questions for the speakers as well, we'll make sure that myself or Miranda or Amanda are monitoring that and making sure you guys get your questions answered. Other than that, I will turn it over to our two awesome, wonderful speakers for today, and I'll go ahead and let the other people, I'll help them get on.
Thank you, Anna. Well, welcome to Successful Aging, 10 Tips for Meaningful Engagement. There we go. All right, let's start with objectives. We're going to explain the continuum of goals and definitions of engagement. We'll talk through how to assess a person's preference. We'll illustrate activity modifications and recognize other antecedent-based environmental improvements. We'll talk through how to use reinforcement-based procedures to maintain skills. And then finally, we'll identify strategies to empower staff's performance. My name is Amanda Ripley. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and this is up at the top is Dr. Miranda Traha. We have been clinicians for challenging behaviors and dementia since the early 2000s. We have practiced in multiple states, settings, and with multiple diagnoses, and you can find us at abilities.today. The idea of successful aging is a social construct we as a society have defined, but is truly idiosyncratic to that individual and their context. In a traditional definition, successful aging is equated with low risk of disease and disability, that blue cog that you see on the screen, minimizing disease risk, as well as maintaining high physical and cognitive functioning, the yellowish cog that you see on the screen. But did you know that a major link to successful aging is meaningful engagement with life? If any of these cogs change in a person's life at any point in their life, the idea of successful aging will be affected. So why is activity engagement so important? I'm going to give you a second to just think about that. I wonder if you thought of any of our bullet points. Because not only does activity engagement promote successful aging, like we mentioned earlier, but it also increases a person's quality of life. It creates meaning and gives us a purpose in our day-to-day life. Activity engagement decreases depression. Many studies have shown us that if we stay engaged, we are happier individuals. and it reduces challenging behaviors. When we get called in as a behavior analyst to tackle a challenging behavior, one of our first line interventions we often prescribe are ways to increase activity engagement. Because as the proverbs say, idle hands are the devil's workshop, meaning if we aren't engaged in an activity, we are bored and unoccupied. We may find ourselves getting into trouble, sabotaging ourselves, delaying business, or reinforcing worries and anxieties. We are using the pronoun we here because these statements are not only for the clients we serve, but hopefully these statements about engagement will resonate with you and another adult that you know. A lack of activity engagement has been shown to expedite nearly any disease process. In particular, if a senior stops engaging and they have any type of memory problem like MCI, mild cognitive impairment, or dementia, their decline trajectory will go much faster. Limbs, brain functioning, and organs will atrophy quicker. Dementia is a whole person disease. It affects behavior, memory, and social roles. A lack of engagement will affect a person's whole body system. Additionally, a lack of engagement will increase a person's likelihood of dementia. One study demonstrated that people who never left their home, even though they did not have any cognitive problems, were twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease. Individuals with intellectual disabilities are in a special category. A special population category, a higher risk category because they have higher levels of isolation and lower levels of social interactions on a daily basis. Just that characteristic, our clients' minimal rate of social engagement, puts them at an elevated risk of dementia. Not to mention, activity engagement preserves a person's dignity. As a society, we recognize human dignity as not only a human right, but as a value that is foundational to our legal and social order. We have heard this time and time again, serving individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, that preserving dignity is one of our core values. It is essential that we contextualize dignity in terms of engagement to influence successful aging. We have come up with 10 tips for meaningful engagement. And here they are. Number 1, to look at the continuum of definitions and goals that surround engagement. Number 2, how to assess preferences in senior populations. Number 3, examples of how to incorporate more spiritual and emotional activities. Number 4, creative ways to modify activities. 5, 6, and 7 are ways in which we can use our ABC model to improve antecedent-based strategies, cultivate independence, and use reinforcement-based procedures to increase the likelihood of engagement. 8, 9, and 10 are ways in which we can increase staff's motivation when it comes to engagement, particularly how we can capitalize on their own interests, how we can teach everyone that the process is just as important as that final product, and how human service agencies can incorporate empowerment programs to teach our staff how to live more fulfilling and engaging lives themselves. Let's start with the number 1 tip, identifying the continuum of definitions and goals around activity engagement. When we talk about activity, there are many terms or behaviors we may be looking at. We are using activity in this presentation as an umbrella term for things like engagement, participation, wellness, interactions, attendance, conversations, and happiness. It's okay to use any of these terms for the people you serve. Just know a couple of things. If you use an emotion like happiness, defined as a person smiling during an activity, you need to recognize that dementia affects a person's outward emotions. In particular, dementia has a profound effect on apathy. Some dementias, like Parkinson's-related dementia, affects a person's muscle movements. So even if that individual is happy, they may not be able to express that with a smile. Their facial muscles can no longer move the mouth creases up or down. The person looks like they're in a perpetual state of unhappiness or disinterest. The outward appearance may not reflect their inside emotions anymore. If you use conversations as your behavior of interest, know that speaking and communication becomes more difficult as a person progresses with dementia. For example, if the person has frontal temporal dementia, their speech will be affected earlier in the disease process than another type of dementia. The person may want to participate with words, but the words come out wrong, or it sounds like word salad. The words are jumbled and you can't make sense of what the person is trying to communicate. That person may then avoid talking altogether to hide any embarrassment. Or that person may become more agitated because you want them to speak more. We like to use engagement with the definition tailored to that particular individual. Engagement could be defined as touching the materials or simply looking at the activity. This will depend on the person's ability and stage of decline. Let's get more into that right now. The behaviors and the words we use to describe engagement will change over time as memory problems progress. Remember, the person is always in decline from the time of diagnosis until death. That means that you are planning for their decline in terms of physical functioning, but also in terms of their willingness to, their engagement skill set and how that will change over time. In the early stages of dementia, we see that the person is still leading activities. They are physically and intellectually active. The person can initiate an activity. They will comment or reply throughout the activity. The person can probably even make requests or provide feedback about how this activity could be better for them. In the moderate stages of decline, activity engagement may look more like involvement and less about leading. So the person may share the materials or collaborate with others in some way. The person can contribute, but they will probably need assistance on some level. Some engagement will be active and some engagement will be passive during this stage. In the later stages of decline, we're looking at more passive engagement. Maybe the goal is for the person to simply watch while the activity is going on. They can view the activity and listen to others talking. We do not see them leading as much, and we don't always see physical involvement in the activity. Now, engagement is not as linear as we just described here. We have seen some late stage individuals lead activities like a sing-along or even a walk around the community. We are pleased when this happens, but our expectations have changed to not predict for these little leadership type of behaviors. Let's actually talk about caregiver expectations for a minute and how those need to be adjusted in senior care. We often have to train caregivers to not focus on what a person used to be able to do, and instead teach caregivers how to meet an individual where they are now, every time, every day. Stop expecting more. And let's start accepting the now. Meet a person where they're at. In our experience, the biggest adjustment for caregivers when they are planning activities are their behavior expectations about the goals of care. When we search for the words to describe a person's goals, we find that there's a lot of terms to describe how a behavior can change over time. This slide is a lot to take in at once, so let's look at those main takeaways. Which is, we do not expect quick changes in behavior, whether that's up or down. So we X'd out the left column. We do not need to use words like rise, grow, increase, drop, fall, or plunge. And we do not expect a sharp or quick or even moderate or significant change in behavior like the right column describes. Instead, we practice in senior care and in dementia care specifically, we focus on using words like slightly, slowly, constant, and stable. We teach caregivers to manage their expectations for slight, slow, constant, stable changes to stay and remain. In our experience, the biggest adjustment in planning interventions after assessment are behavior expectations about those goals of care. That's difficult sometimes for caregivers to get, simply because we often work in fields where we're trying to increase skills, but in dementia, we focus on maintaining. Our second tip is to know how to assess someone's preferences as they age and as they show signs of a memory problem. Preferences change over time and over a person's life. Preferences really change during those older years when it's more difficult to move. Things that were once preferred are no longer enjoyed anymore. Preferences can change over time because of one's age, cognitive level, time of day, social interactions with others, and presence of certain established motivators. And here are some examples. The things you like in your childhood, like watching Barney and Friends or playing school, are no longer preferred when you reach into your 20s. And the social activities you did in your 20s, like showing up at a random house party or going on an adventure with a stranger, may no longer be preferred as you age into your 40s. Similarly, the activities we enjoy as mature adults, like playing bridge and hosting large family gatherings, are no longer preferred past the age of 70. We may prefer to do some activities seasonally, like walking outdoors may be much more enjoyed, especially right now, in the spring and the fall, and chosen less often in the summer and winter. We may prefer to do some activities in the morning and less likely to do them in the evening or afternoon. Sometimes we may like to meditate in the evening, surrendering our thoughts for the day, versus meditating in the morning when your brain is, planning your to-do list. All this to say is that we are all different. We like different things at different times of the day and different times of the year. We have different motivators, social factors that influence our behavior. It's important to accept that for us, as well as for the people that we serve. Another reason for identifying preferences is that a successful behavior change program often requires an effective reinforcer that the practitioner or caregiver can control, that they can provide throughout the day or contingent upon other behaviors. Identifying robust and reliable reinforcers for people with dementia can pose a challenge. Because they may have limited family or friends that are still alive, their senses have declined even more, confusion increases and alters their reality, their mobility decreases, and their environment becomes even smaller. Also, so many materials for a variety of reasons are less reinforcing to that individual in their senior years. As you may already know, preference assessments are procedures used to determine which foods or items are preferred by the person in order to determine which are likely to work as positive reinforcers. Preference assessments help us determine the stimuli or items and events that a person prefers, the relative preference values of those stimuli, high versus low, and the conditions under which those preference values change when the task demands, deprivation states, or the schedules of reinforcement are modified. There are three main ways we can complete a preference assessment. We can ask the person or ask the caregiver questions, we can observe the person, or we can set up a preference test scenario. Let's take a look at each of these separately. There are many types of preference assessment questionnaires and inventories. Some common senior preference assessments you can find online are called the PES, so the Pleasant Events Survey, the Geriatric Reinforcer Survey, and the SIQ, the Stimulus Identification Questionnaire, just to name a few. At Abilities, we came up with our own, which is a mixture of the above mentioned questionnaires. We have the survey broken up into categories as we ask about sports, music, games. You can ask the person if they like these things now or if they used to like to do things. We like to ask the seniors we work with at least once a year about their preferences. Many times when you ask an older adult if they like this or that, they're going to either give a lot of yeses, which turn out to be false yeses in that they say they like it, but then when you actually give them the item, they don't engage. Or they give me lots of no's. No, I don't like that. No, I don't like to do that. But when I observe them, they're doing it, they're engaging. So be aware of false no's if we only ask the person what they like. That's why we like to observe the person in the activity as well. Essentially, when activities or items are easily available, what will a person do? How will they engage? Do they touch the item? Do they walk away from the event? When we cannot rely on a person's verbal answers anymore, and this is often the case as a senior with dementia declines, we need to use those observations more often to identify what a person likes to do. What we often see during this observation period is that by simply delivering items and sitting near staff, that this increases activity engagement. What a simple intervention, but one that can be kind of difficult to implement, because which items do you deliver? How long can a staff sit next to a person? Or do staff even want to sit next to this person? Even if you think the answer is, well, it doesn't matter what staff wants, they need to do it, it's their job. That management mindset can be the limitation that prevents this strategy from working. We'll get into that predicament a little bit later in this presentation. The third way we can assess preference is to test out our activity scenarios. We can take one of two approaches. The first is to gather a list of activities you want to test. Say you come up with 5 activities. You would create a data sheet just like this and pair each of those 5 activities together. So the first activity is paired with the second. The first activity is then paired with the third activity. The first activity is paired with the fourth activity, and so on and so forth until all of them are paired together. Then across different days and times, you give these pairs to the client and say, which one would you rather do now? The person picks 1, and then they pick 3, and then they pick 2, and then 3 again, and finally 5. And then we take data on their choices and what they're picking, and eventually we can determine a hierarchy of preferences from most to least preferred. The second approach is to test out preference scenarios, is to take data on how long a person will engage in an activity. We like to do this over 2 to 3 trials on 2 to 3 different days and different opportunities. For example, item number 1, we give it to the person and they engage in it for 15 minutes. We give them item number 2, we give it to the person, they engage in that activity for 75 minutes. We do the same for activities 3 through 5. Then the following week, we do the trials all over again. Do we get the same scores or different scores for the items 1 through 5? Again, we can create a hierarchy of preferences, or we get a ranking on which is most preferred and which is least preferred, because then we have real data to support those preferences. Oh, sorry, cat. Okay. Here's an example of a person's hierarchy. We see on this chart that the person chose music 100% of those opportunities, followed by sports, Legos, games, magazines, painting, and then arranging flowers. As a staff member for this person, I'm less likely going to ask the person to paint or arrange flowers with me, even if I present the activity in a new way. I'm really instead going to focus on those music and sport-related programs because they were the most preferred. We believe in filling a person's final days with lots of preferred activities during those last years of life. Our takeaway is focus on those high preferences. Senior care is about the quality of life and access to the materials a person really likes. We're out of that teenage, early adult, middle-aged stage where we are introducing new and innovative activities to the person. Senior care, especially dementia care, is about giving an individual access to high quality, high preferred activities as much as possible. All right, tip number 3 is that we recommend incorporating more spiritual and emotional activities into a person's daily routine. Let's talk about how our clients spend their 24 hours in a day. On this side, the left side are the hours per day, and here's what we can probably plan for. For the first one is for sleep or rest time. I know that we want an individual to sleep a lot, but as an older adult, an older adult can survive off of 5 hours of resting in the 24-hour period. It's great if you get more, but in clinical practice, plan and prep families for 5 to 6 hours of a rest period. Now that could be 5 hours at night and 1 in the day, or some sort of mishmash in between day and night sleeping. Again, great if you get more, but plan for the worst case scenario, which is surviving off of 5 or 6 hours of sleep. Next, we see individuals spend about 4 to 5 hours in scheduled activities of daily living. Things like getting dressed for the day and night, showering, that's about 2 hours a day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and meals are about 2.5 hours a day. And then you add in the 30 minutes of doctor's appointments, physical therapy, visitors, etc. Next, let's throw in about 1 to 2 hours each day of activities around the house or the community. Things like using electronics, using their iPad, their TV, walking the halls or neighborhood of the agency. These are activities that preoccupy people without staff or families. Again, this is only 1 to 2 hours a day because as the person ages and they decline, you'll need to provide more checks and more supervision. Okay, so what's left? Well, that's about 12 hours a day that you need to plan for your client. And what will that person be doing during those other 12 hours of the day? How can you help the person plan their life of leisure? How do we give purpose and add meaning to these last senior days? Practitioners in gerontology often categorize leisure activities into dimensions of wellness, some divided into 6, 7, or 8 dimensions of wellness. Here we'll discuss the common 6 that you'll find in senior care. Those categories are physical, intellectual, emotional, vocational, social, and spiritual. Some examples for each of these categories may include, for physical activities, those are the ones in which we move our bodies, and that can include walking, dancing, completing chores. For vocational activities, those are in which we expand our educational awareness. Just because we're serving seniors doesn't mean we can't incorporate an educational component in their lives. These activities may include volunteering or productive activities. Intellectual activities are those in which we expand our cognitive functioning. Common activities include brain games, puzzles, creative challenges. Social activities are those in which what we're doing with other people to incorporate interactions and connect with others. These can include clubs or even virtual reality games. Then there's emotional activities, and those are in which we learn to understand, experience, and express our day-to-day feelings. Common activities include attending support groups and journaling. Lastly, spiritual activities are those in which we connect to a higher power, a God of our understanding. Even if a person is atheist or agnostic, most of us can recognize that we are not the creators of everything, and we can have a deeper appreciation for the world around us. Activities in the spiritual domain include hymns and prayers. Our tip number 3 focuses on more activities in these last 2 categories, in the emotional and spiritual categories. When we talk to staff and middle management about activity programming, we get a lot of cooking and baking programs, outside and physical activities, and we hear about social programs and even some wonderful intellectual programs. But for some reason, communities and agencies really shy away from emotional and spiritual activities. One hypothesis is that staff do not tend to plan for these activities in their own lives. Our culture doesn't place high value on emotional and spiritual dimensions of wellness. In fact, in some spaces, these activities are frowned upon or even made fun of. But we see, especially after COVID, that more people are becoming interested in these emotional and spiritual activities. More people, even the clients we serve, are questioning life's purpose. Seniors question why. Why is this even a part of life? Or why is this a part of the final stage of life, especially if they are losing so much around them? If we start incorporating more emotional and spiritual practices in our day-to-day, we will start to see more meaning, more purpose, more engagement in our everyday lives. Let's discuss examples of what can fit into these emotional and spiritual categories. Emotional activities first. Support groups, we believe, are an underutilized resource. There are so many groups out there, especially after COVID. So many of these groups are online now too. So you can be in a group with people from California to Florida to New Zealand. Support group topics can be specific to those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, people with varying sexual or gender identities, people who are seeking spiritual information, people who are learning how to name their emotions. Some groups are for people with certain specific mental health diagnoses or even senior-related support groups. Journaling and validating feelings, teaching people how to track their emotions, how to identify their emotions. There are feeling wheels out there with varying levels of descriptors that you can incorporate into your programming. Simply asking a client, can you help me? Or I need your help, makes people feel that they are valued because they can help you. They're adding value to your life, which adds value to their life. Limiting the news is a proactive way to manage someone's emotions. Sometimes seniors watch the news for hours and hours at a time. It's a way to feel like they're connecting to the world or that they know what's going on in the world. But so much of the news is discomforting to watch and hear. It's not like NBC and ABC are acknowledging the world and all the positive contributions in society. Just think about how our country's mental health would be so different if we only heard positive news on the cable channels. The power of touch. Think about your daily life. How much does your spouse or children or parents or family or friends touch you, hug you, rub your back, sit close to you, sleep next to you? Now think about the clients we serve, and in particular, our seniors. How much touch do they get? Touch is 20% of our sensory sensations, and yet our clients barely get access to any of that. How can we incorporate more positive touch in their daily life? Think about fresh air and sunlight, how it is so important to a person's emotional functioning. Our clients spend so much time inside in the AC, smelling and seeing only what's in those four walls. The sun, the moon, and nature connects us to our day and provides us with those natural endorphins. Think about a vision board, how that can help to plan for the future wishes, or memory books that help us reminisce about the past. These are great ways to connect us emotionally. Breathing exercises and stretching are great ways to move and use our body as designed. These are great methods to help us self-soothe and connect us with our natural human states. Animals are a wonderful way to add smiles into our lives. It's also a great way, an appropriate way to incorporate that positive touch that we've been talking about. Lastly, positive affirmations can be critical to building a person's self-worth, even if they're a senior. People deserve to hear, you are loved and you are lovable. You're safe and you're supported. You are worth it. There are tons more positive affirmations we can tell the people we serve, and they deserve to hear it. Okay, let's get into some spiritual activities. You may notice that some of these activities can fit into multiple categories, and that's okay. We like multifunctioning activities. Some of the most common spiritual activities include music, so church music, meditation music, sacred music, hymns, all of it has its place. So let's start with saying prayers. The Christian kinds, but also the interfaith or even the 12-step prayers are wonderful to incorporate into a daily routine. Meditation programs, teaching people how to slow their thoughts or center their thoughts around sacred words like God, grace, trust, love. Chanting is another great practice to try to give people alternative ways to organize their thoughts. We often perseverate on negative thoughts or get into negative spirals, and our clients do too. Chanting gives us an alternative pattern to perseverate on. Going to church or Sunday service in person or online, or even reading spiritual readings and passages are great. There is so much on YouTube and different podcasts are out there for spiritual understandings. There's so many choices now. Let's discuss life's purpose a little bit more often. Let's hear what our clients think and find out if it's positive or negative. Then we can respond in appropriate ways and help organize their thoughts about life's purpose. Walk barefoot outside, feel the soil. Let's get crunchy, Let's feel the earth and its power that makes sense to each of us individually. Maybe we can work with crystals, oracle cards, and the power of salts and crystals. It's another way to connect with Earth's minerals and stones. Using aromatherapy or teas with herbs. Americans are barely starting to understand the medicinal powers of herbs. Some are great for anxiety, some depression. Some are sensitive to medical conditions like bowel movement issues or skin irritations. Along the same line, growing spiritual plants. For example, holy basil or tulsi basil has been shown to boost your body's health in a variety of ways. It can help protect against infection, lower your blood sugar, lower your cholesterol, ease your joint pain, and protect your stomach. It's really easy to grow, and it's a perennial, which means it'll come back year after year. You can eat it, cook with it, sniff it, drink it in tea. Growing these kinds of plants teach reliance and is good for the body and soul. Salt baths, bath bombs, hot tubs, all great spiritual activities. Writing gratitude lists is another great spiritual practice. Being thankful for today is a present moment activity that boosts your mood even when dark events surround you. And dancing. Dancing is a great mood elevator and can be a spiritual connection for people. We believe that we need to include an emotional and spiritual activity every day. Emotional intelligence is just as important as moving your body on a daily basis. Spiritual awakening is just as vital as social connections to others. When we see these categories as influential as they truly are, we'll be amazed at how we can show up for ourselves and for the people that we serve. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Miranda.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for taking us through those first few tips for meaningful engagement. Now let's move on to tip number 4, activity modifications. There are so many ways you can modify an activity. Here are just some of our most common recommendations. First, consider sitting and not standing during activities. For example, exercise, stretching, and even sports like volleyball can all be completed in a chair or a seated position. This makes it easier for the older adult to endure the activity for a longer period of time. Seniors really do lose their ability to stand for long periods of time. As a person ages, we like to present smaller amounts of demands. Activities, even though fun, can be demanding and taxing on an individual. Like we discussed in the beginning, engagement looks different as the person declines. So too will the amount of time spent in the activity. If a typical activity you plan for about 30 minutes, then think about 10 minutes of stimulation for that individual and then give them a break. Third, we advise making the environment smaller. At some point in the memory decline, we need to stop taking individuals out. The environment just becomes too confusing to the person and triggers a lot of challenging behaviors. At this point in decline, the person prefers their known environment. For example, we once had a lady who would go out to restaurants with her sister each week. But as she progressed with dementia, the restaurant setting was no longer enjoyable to her. She repeatedly asked her sisters questions like, "Where are we?" and "I need to go home." The person functioned better and remembered more in their everyday setting. That doesn't mean that we didn't give her access to fun community events that she enjoyed anymore. It meant we brought those events to the person in their preferred environment. So for that client in particular, we advised the sisters to bring the restaurant food to her sister in her own home. She got to enjoy the food, her sister's company, and was in a familiar environment. We did not observe those repeated and stressful statements from the client under these circumstances. Next, we advise incorporating more senses into your programming. Trouble speaking and understanding verbal language is one of the first signs of decline. A person can't understand or doesn't like programming where we just talk to them all the time. We've done programs like Sip and Strolls for social hour. We'll pick a theme like lemons, and we have different stations set up in the room. At station number 1, you drink lemonade while you're looking at or completing a simple lemon puzzle. At station number 2, you sip on a lemon seltzer water and you watch videos about lemons. And then at station number 3, we have lemon slices for you to try, as well as whole lemons for you to hold and check out. Staff can change the theme to anything, really. You can continue with the fruits and vegetables, have a berry theme or an orange food theme, Or you can theme a time period, a 1960s sip and stroll, a 1999 sip and stroll, and so much more. The next way we modify an activity is to simply bring all the items closer to the individual. Provide all materials to them right in front of that person. Ease of access can increase engagement. Avoid keeping items in a cabinet where a person can't see something and then expect them to go get those items out of the cabinet to engage. They won't ask and they won't get the items out on their own. Their environment slowly becomes an out of sight, out of mind paradigm. We also recommend being flexible on the location of an activity. Don't be worried about changing the location of an activity. For example, cooking activities usually take place in the kitchen or the dining room, but it doesn't have to. Most of the prep work can be done at a table wherever the person is comfortable. Maybe that's in the living room or even their bedroom. Yes, you as staff have to prep for that, but it can be done and has been effective for us. The last note we wanted to make about activity modifications is around creativity. So often we see staff only think in terms of how they know the activity as it currently is. They don't get a chance to be creative in thinking of activity solutions outside of the box. We can explain this idea better with examples. Let's take golfing for our first example. Say we have a person that has liked to play golf as an adult. However, now with the difficulty of their mobility, this is not exactly an activity option for them. So what are some ideas to modify this activity? Sure, we can make some of those activity modifications we've already discussed, like sitting while putting, or golfing for a shorter period of time than the whole 9 or 18 holes, or even putting at home instead of at the greens. But how can we change the entire version of the activity while still keeping the theme related to golfing? So I'm going to give you a couple seconds to think about that and see if you've come up with some of our creative solutions, which are, here's some ideas that we've had. You can complete golf trivia with the person. You can play a game of Guess Who, showing pictures of famous golfers and discussing their records or just information about those golfers. You can look at golf magazines, which then in my head makes me think about lots of golf crafts that you can do. You can go out to the greens, rent a cart, and just drive around the golf course, talking about what you see at the time, talking about the golfers that you see on the course. You can sit at the driving range and watch other people hit the golf balls. You can go to Topgolf and do the same thing, watch other people hit the balls. You can even bring in those emotional and spiritual activities to the green, like do a little bit of stretching or yoga at the golf course. Now let's say we have a person who likes to play bingo, but really gets caught up in the numbers and has become more confused and so really can't play bingo anymore. What's some ideas to modify this activity? Here are some of our ideas and some things that we've done with clients. We've had people sit next to the caller and simply write down the bingo numbers as the caller calls bingo. We've done bingo trivia, which we've just Googled bingo trivia and got some information online. We can ask the person and say, I need your help. Can you help me call bingo? This is one of the ways that you can include that emotional aspect into the activity. Have the person feel like you really do need their help. We can make a gratitude list of things that start with the letters B, I, N, G, and O, like I'm grateful for B, being alive, the bees that produce honey, for behavior services. I am grateful for I, individuality, instant coffee, inclusion. I am grateful for N, nice people, nacho cheese. I am grateful for G, going outside, gatherings like these. I am grateful for O, outside time, open spaces, and the opportunity to be here today. We've played a game where individuals guess the letter for each of the numbers, the bingo numbers 1 through 75. So where can you find the number 2 under the B? Where can you find the number 70 under the O? We've had people just watch and observe other people play bingo games. We have saved bingo cards as their winning cards, and we've looked at them outside of our bingo time, kind of like a reminiscing activity. And then I haven't done this, but I've always wanted to do this, is then take those bingo cards and make a memory book out of them and write down little memories, the date or the time or who was with you when you won the bingo game. Or even playing a game of bingo with less numbers on the board, like only 9 or 16 spaces instead of the typical 25. We have okay, so what if you have people who like to attend church, but now they can't go to it like they used to because they're a senior? And actually, we came upon this a lot during COVID and stay in place. So what are some activity ideas to modify this activity? Well, some of these we've discussed already, but it's worth sharing again. One is looking at church programs online. Like Amanda mentioned, there are just so many YouTube channels or podcasts or different online programs that you can attend, really any spiritual denomination out there. Reading and saying prayers in a room or even in an online group of people. So maybe a support group or maybe just a fellowship group that meets online who want to say the same prayers that our clients know. We've made fill in the blank sheets where I say a prayer line and then the person fills in a word or the last word. It's a little bit of behavioral momentum for them. What about just reminiscing about church events, talking about going to church when you were a kid or going to service whenever you were an adult? What were your favorite memories? What kind of things stuck out to you? There's a lot of trivia about any world religion out there. So we've made simple trivia sheets for the individual to talk through. Songs and hymns, of course. And for a few people, we've taken them to church or a service, but we'll sit in the back of the room in what some places call a cry room. It's a room that has a lot of windows, so you can see what's going on in the church service, but it's a soundproof room. So if the individual keeps talking through church service, which is typical in dementia care, or they're asking questions or even making comments about the people that they see or the around them, they're in a safe space to watch and observe and participate in church, but they're out of hearing from other people that are in the service. So it's a win-win. Another idea is to check out The Current. The Current does a really great job of identifying activity modifications. There's over 700 activities for people with intellectual disabilities on there. And for each of those 700 plus activities, there's a section where you can build it up or break it down. And that is ways in which we can make the activities more difficult or easier for the user. Very, very clever. If you would like to know more, you can go ahead and check out www.intersectforability.com and you'll find The Current there. Okay, the next 3 tips are associated with the ABCs of behavior. Tip number 5 is about antecedent-based improvements. Tip number 6, we look at ways in which we increase the individual's behavior. And tip number 7, we discuss consequence-based procedures. So let's review the ABCs of behavior real quick. Anytime we go into a person's home and analyze the person's environment, we look at using the ABC model. We want to know, A, what occurs before the behavior? What are those antecedents? This could be staff's approach, activity type, or even environmental considerations like what's the lighting situation? What kind of smells are in the air? How many people are around that person? B is the person's behavior, what a person is thinking or doing or feeling. And this could be inappropriate behaviors like refusal of care, or it could be appropriate behavior like cooperation. And C are the consequences of that behavior. What happened right after the behavior occurred? Did staff praise or positively touch that individual? Was the person removed from a setting? Did we reprimand the person or remind them what he or she should not be doing? Or did nothing really happen and the activity just continued? We have interventions for each of these domains, the A's, B's, and C's, respectively tips number 5, 6, and 7. But first we'll talk about the antecedent manipulations. The most common antecedent manipulations we prescribe are the following. First, we make the task less effortful. We provide less demands to that individual, which we had discussed a little earlier in the presentation, which is bringing activity materials right in front of that person. They don't have to think or stand or go find those activities. Next would be the time of day, AM versus PM. Some people really do perform better during certain time periods over other time periods. And we also like to consider, what is this activity coming after? So is the activity right after a stressful routine like a shower routine? Or is this activity happening after a person has a prolonged time period of being alone and by themselves? We observe and note if staff are checking in with the person throughout the activity, if the staff are providing reminders before the activity start, and then also throughout the activity. Environmental arrangements mean we're really addressing the physical setting of the environment. So the lights, the noise level, the temperature in the room, which way the chairs are facing, are the window blinds open or shut? Each of these small things can really have a profound effect on if a person is going to engage or not. Here's an example. We had a lady who would try to leave the day program early every day. She would leave the table even whenever her most highly preferred activities were right in front of her. In our analysis, we noticed that she would get up and leave when she saw the buses pull up. She was looking through the blinds, and when she saw the buses pull up, that's when she would stand up and start pacing around the room. So our intervention was pretty simple. We got staff to close the blinds at a certain time period right before the buses showed up. So the blinds were open all day long, which she had no problem with. And then right before that, 3 o'clock time period, so like 2:30, 2:40, we would just made a habit of closing those blinds and continue to provide highly preferred activities during this time period. And sure enough, we saw high rates of engagement during that time period and decreases in her challenging behaviors. Repairing. So repairing means that you are pairing yourself with a preferred activity or a preferred person. Maybe we have a friend complete the activity with that individual because that friend is more likely to be reinforcing to that individual. And so when we're present with the friend, we're repairing ourselves and making ourselves become more reinforcing too. This is a great intervention for new staff or staff who do not have good rapport with your individuals that you're serving. And lastly, we want to make sure that there's a lot of choices before and throughout the activity program. For choice, we do not want to ask the person any kind of open-ended questions. No who, what, when, where, why questions. No, what do you want to do next? Or what's your favorite activity? Instead, we stick to yes, no questions or multiple choice questions. For example, do you like bowling? Yes or no? Or do you want to play checkers or do you want to bowl? The best antecedent improvement is to increase a person's motivation to do that activity. But how do we increase a person's motivation? Well, first we need to recognize that motivation is not located inside of the person. Motivation depends on what's going on in your environment. Many people hear this and say, what? You don't think the brain or the gut have anything to do with motivation? Well, of course we do. We're not saying that motivation is completely outside of the person. I know that the innards of the person affects motivation. However, I can manipulate a person's motivation by simply changing their environment. Here's some examples. You're not hungry. You just ate a big pasta dinner and you tell me I'm not hungry. I can't eat a single bite, another bite. But then I bring out a plate of donuts and pastries and jelly rolls and chocolate croissants. Will you eat something off of that plate? Can you take just one more bite if there's a sweet treat right in front of you? Okay, what if we're talking about going outside and you don't want to go outside, you don't want to be in the sun with me. And so then I take that same plate of pastries and jelly rolls and chocolate croissants outside. Will you walk with me now? Have I increased your motivation to be with me outside? Maybe it's not food. Maybe it's your most preferred person that you take outside and you just want to be with that person. So then you end up going outside. Here's our last example, dancing. Say you're shy and you don't want to dance. You're in a meeting and you have no desire, no motivation to dance right now. But then you hear this beat by Earth, Wind, and Fire, and then maybe you're swaying, you're tapping your foot, snapping your fingers, you're bopping your head. Okay, here we go. You got some role models showing you it's okay to dance in a meeting. Me and Amanda are smiling and laughing. Maybe you're a Virgo, baby. Shout out to Virgos, and you love songs about September. Maybe you like 70s music or music with horns. For any of those reasons, maybe we've increased your motivation even for a second. You weren't motivated to dance 5 minutes ago, but here you are now swaying to the music. See, your environment really does matter. Do not make assumptions about what should and should not motivate a person. Simply identifying what does motivate a person in each moment of time is what's important. Know that motivation can vary from moment to moment and that ongoing planning for motivators is needed. Finally, know that motivation is key within all aspects of life and an important part of the overall comprehensive plan for engagement, but it really is only one part. Don't forget about all those other antecedent manipulations that we've talked about and all the other interventions that we're about to get to, like tip number 6, cultivating independence. There are so many different types of prompts out there. Picture prompts, texture prompts, words, gestures, physical guidance. We don't just teach types of prompts. We really focus on skillful prompts. Prompts can increase the likelihood of a desired behavior to maintain independence, but skillful prompts are knowing which prompts to use and when to use those prompts. Here's an example. If a person knows a skill, they remember the skill, and they do have some memory problems, maybe around the order of tasks. We'll teach those caregivers and staff members to use a technique called least to most prompting, the tell, show, guide scenario. We teach the staff to tell the person what to do, then show the person how to do it, and then use a manual guidance prompt to complete that task. But if your individual has completely lost the skill and they really cannot remember the sequence, this is not a good prompting hierarchy. Instead, we teach caregivers and staff members to use most to least promptings. We go backwards in that hierarchy. There are lots of nonverbal prompts like textual prompts and pictorial prompts, and Amanda and I use a lot of them with almost all of our clients that we have that are seniors. When we teach skillful prompts, we also teach staff members procedures in how to fade prompts because we do not want seniors to become prompt dependent. We try to put that off for as long as possible. We know that eventually it will come, especially in that late stage of decline, really during those last few months of life. But we try to put off prompt dependence, like I said, for as long as possible. Okay, moving right along to tip number 7, looking at reinforcement-based procedures. You remember this slide? Antecedents or anything before the behavior happens. We talked about what to change, like moving people or furniture, being creative, doing things that the person likes, giving choices, yada, yada, yada. And then we look at the behaviors, how to increase the person's own behaviors, and we use a lot of prompts to do that. And then the C's are the consequences. What happens after the behavior? So let's talk about those consequences for a moment and how those C's or consequences can affect a person's behavior, and how if you get in the habit of differentially reinforcing people, their behaviors can change over time. Let's say we have the same antecedent, which is come do this activity with me. So come bowl with me, come journal with me, come do golf with me. You might get one of 2 responses from that person. The first would be some kind of happy face, or just that they're okay with doing the activity with you. The second response might be an apathetic face, or a grumpy face, or even an anxious face. Some behavior that lets you know the person doesn't want to do whatever you're asking them to do. If the person responds in the first way, we like to encourage a lot of positive praise, high five. We give them their flowers and say, wow, I'm so glad you're doing this with me. We really pile on those good interactions with the person. And then for the second type of response, we often prescribe staff to follow a series of prompts to get that person to do that activity. We don't advise staff to not pay attention to the individual and their negative behavior, but we do advise staff to give more high quality, high energy reinforcement related to those engagement related behaviors. After we teach staff how to use those series of prompts, and which are idiosyncratic to that individual and the context in which they're in, the environment in which they're in, and then we see more appropriate behaviors, well, then we teach staff, okay, go to that high quality energy and consequences for that individual. This method is what we call differential reinforcement. We differentially reinforce appropriate behaviors and give less attention, less energy to those inappropriate or refusal behaviors. A quick note about praise. We try to stay away from something called elder speak, and we avoid using baby talk with seniors. So we don't say, hey, young lady, or aren't those old people just so adorable? We watch our tone and intonation. We do not use high-pitched voices or tones that we would typically hear whenever we're talking with children. Seniors are not children, and they should not be spoken to in that way. With praise for seniors, we smile more and we use nonverbals more because we like to remind seniors that they're on the right track. And like we mentioned earlier, our verbals can get confusing to them. So we like to use a lot of nonverbals like smiling or nodding along or kind of giving them a thumbs up so that way they know they're on the right track. The next 3 tips revolve around staff's motivation and their abilities to conduct these activity programs. Tip number 8 connects staff's interest to our planned activities. We believe that we could and we should capitalize on staff's interest when designing programs. We need to see that our employees are our most valuable asset in an organization. We put the most time and the most money into them. It's their abilities, knowledge, and experience that cannot be replaced. So how do we make jobs where someone is spending 10, 20, or 40 more hours of their work week with us? How do we make that person's time more meaningful to them while they are with us? How do we continue to invest in our people and propel them to do better? We think an easy win is to find out what they like to do and then have the staff members do that with the individuals that we serve. When we discuss staff's interests, we are referring to all levels of an organization, from admin to clinical staff to our financial advisors, and then, of course, our direct support personnel. Let's get curious about their interests and their hobbies. We can ask them what programs they would like to lead us in. Some people really like to craft. Well, they can lead us in our arts and crafts programs. Some people really like music. Great. You can pick some songs and deconstruct them with our residents. Some staff like to move a lot. Wonderful. Love that. We ask those staff to lead our exercise programs. Other staff like to cook. Yummy, yummy. Good for us. We ask those staff to lead our culinary programs. And sometimes we get staff and people who just don't know. They don't have any hobbies or interests, or at least they can't verbalize that to us. You would not believe how many people do not know what they're interested in because they have not had the opportunity to try so many things. Some staff we've met have never been to the zoo, have never visited a large body of water, have never played certain board games. Some staff have shared that they never cook, they always eat out, or they always eat prepared meals. Some staff have never done breath work or done yoga exercises. So we ask them to get curious about themselves. We give them a few easy and fun activities. We let them try out a variety of things. And then we go back and ask for their feedback. What did you like about this program? What didn't you like about this program? We also want to know how we can help that staff member during these planned events. We jumbled the hierarchy of the organizational chart here to convey that meaningful engagement means thinking about the community as a shared partnership. We share leadership roles in this work. We believe that it is everyone's job to keep seniors active. It truly takes a community to care for our older adults. We want your input and yours and yours and yours. All, 87 of you on here. At all levels of an organization, we remind staff, I'm not the only expert in the room. You're with that person more hours with me. You're an expert on that individual, and that's important. You bring value to this organization simply for being you. Meaningful engagement means we understand that we have an opportunity to learn from our community. This is a bi-directional learning process. It means that we're coming to the table as equal partners. Tip number 9 states that the process is as important as the product. Now, this bears repeating. The process is as important as the product. If we continue to teach ourselves, the people that we work with, and the individuals that we serve, that only the product matters, that only the completion of this activity matters, then the less we love ourselves going through the process. Product only thinking will lead to feelings that nothing is good enough. We must teach ourselves, the people that we work with, and our individuals that we serve, that the process is important, whatever that process is, whether that's learning to increase activity engagement, or learning what other people like to do, or anticipating needs. That process takes time and energy and love and compassion, not just for the people that we serve, but also for the people that we work with, and most importantly, ourselves. Let's not treat each other like check boxes. Let's not treat our activities as just one more thing to get through today. Changing our mindset about enjoying the whole process, all the moments, our whole self, will help us find more fulfillment in life. In this respect, we are incorporating mindfulness into our daily practices. It doesn't matter if you do things perfectly or correct all the time, you see, because it's not about the final product. What really matters in a community are those daily social interactions. We are in the business of building relationships. Activity engagement is about being present during all the minutes that we get to spend together. We want to emphasize investing in your organizational community. Mindful minutes are beneficial to the outcomes for anything you want to accomplish. But this type of work takes spending time with your community, with your staff, and building real relationships. This kind of deep engagement also means investment for more than just a single clinician or from an individual program manager. You have to make sure that there are systems and processes in place at the organizational level that allow staff within your organization to take the time at your agency and leadership to recognize the value of the work that staff is doing. The wider the variety of worldviews and lived experiences that inform a community vision, the more likely it is that the resulting plan will address the needs of even the most vulnerable and most marginalized persons within your community. We are not talking about a one and done video training run by HR. Building trusting relationships with people and finding a variety of ways to enable their connection to a project or a process or a group of people really requires a sustained effort. Let's wrap up with tip number 10, staff empowerment programs. When we start to look deep into our staff's behavior patterns, we may find that they do not come to work for large sums of money that we pay them. They do not work for the fame of serving others, but often they're working as a way to survive on so many levels. So organizations, why not take this opportunity to teach our staffs not only to survive, but how to find peace and love in life in spite of all its difficulties? Many of our staff suffer from the human condition. They have had trauma, they are shameful, they have loneliness in their life, they struggle with mental health issues like depression and anxiety. We all share that in common, all of us. Let's stop looking at staff as just a name on a schedule, like how we don't want staff to look at our clients like just a checkbox. And let's look at each other as whole people, just as how we see our clients as whole people. Remember, we're creating a community here, a network of people who support each other throughout life's stressors and life's joys. We need more organizations to show one another affection, love, and commitment, even when the worst hand is dealt in life. And sometimes, often, that process is over long periods of time. Solutions to empowerment for our staff are complex. It can be uncomfortable, but we can find growth in discomfort. What a beautiful thing it is to see growth. Am I right? Seeing your children grow, seeing your spouse grow, seeing your colleagues grow, seeing plants grow, and of course, seeing our clients grow. Growing is not an easy process, and we need to ask ourselves things like, do I take the time to really listen to others? Or am I clicking on the computer while somebody's in my office? Am I listening? Am I learning to listen to my own self? Or am I suppressing my own negative feelings? Do I get curious about my feelings? Am I honest with naming my emotions, either to myself or when I'm talking to other people? We need to elevate mental health and emotional conversations with our staff. Empowerment programs are about sharing honestly what has worked for you. What self-soothing practices have you tried? Do you journal or attend a 12-step program? Do you meditate or have a prayer practice? Sharing is caring, and this can truly help our staff members. People do not leave their emotions at home whenever they walk into our doors. That is an archaic way of thinking about our staff. They do not come into people come to your agency as a whole person, and we really need to start treating each other as that, as whole people with positive and negative feelings, with scary and joyful emotions. Now, some of you might feel like this is too touchy-feely for you, and maybe some of you think this is an HR issue. This is not my issue. But this is a people issue, and I think that everyone on this call is working with people. Maybe you're in a company that's already offering something like an EAP program, or maybe your company pays for subscriptions like apps to the Calm app, and that's a really great start. But empowering staff is a sustained issue, and it is ongoing and will continue to show up in your workplace. Activities are fun, but not always easy. Engagement is not like showering. It's not like a dinner routine, and it's not even like following a behavior plan. Engagement is not a checklist. Engagement is in every moment, in every interaction throughout our day, whether that's with the individuals that we serve, with our colleagues, or just within ourselves. Remember, engagement is not about checking something off a list. It's about enjoying yourself more. When your coworkers enjoy themselves, when your DSPs enjoy themselves more, I can guarantee you that your clients will enjoy themselves more. It's about the process and the day-to-day. It's about bringing you back to those mindful moments for when you can show up better for yourself, we can better show up for the people around us. We know you have a choice in presentation topics and behavior support providers. We are so grateful that you chose Abilities to present on successful aging at this ICPN training. If you have any questions or follow-up statements, you can reach us at www.abilities.today. Thank you so much for attending. We're proud of you for attending today's talk, and remember, you're worth it.
Thanks, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm like, what's happening? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Thanks, Anna. I haven't looked through the chat to see if any questions popped up.
No, did we end? How are questions still popping up? It's closed, right?
I don't think so.
I see the chat is still continuing. It's still popping up. Yep.
Okay. So I need to end this. Hold on.